Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're not just looking back at a retro game for the sake of nostalgia. We're going to examine the 1995 classic JRPG, that's Japanese role-playing game, Tales of Phantasia, but we're doing it through a completely different lens. We're actually going to explore it as a profound psychological crucible. For so many young players back in the day, this wasn't merely weekend entertainment. It was this intense, completely unguided rite of passage that genuinely forged real-world cognitive and emotional skills. It's fascinating when you really start to unpack it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's a quick look at the analytical structure of our journey today. We'll start by looking at the game as a mythic childhood crucible, explore its deep systems and strategic mastery, and then get into the weight of time. After that, we'll look at how it shatters binary morality through empathy, the sheer power of navigating an unguided journey, and finally, a hero's lasting legacy. Section 1. The Mythic Childhood Crucible. A portal to transformation.
I think it is absolutely crucial that we treat childhood gaming with dignity. Honestly, it's way too often dismissed as mere distraction or just a way to kill time. But for so many people, it served as a profound training ground. It was a space where young minds were quietly initiated, learning these incredibly vital life lessons long before the real world actually demanded them. And this brings us to a really vital guiding question. Can an unguided game truly act as a real-world rite of passage? Well, think about it. When a young person is thrown into a terrifyingly complex system with absolutely no guide, facing overwhelming enemies, labyrinthine puzzles, and real moral weight, they undergo a kind of internal, mythic transformation. They aren't just getting better at pressing buttons faster, they are fundamentally learning how to confront the unknown. Take our protagonist, for example. Cress begins his journey in the peaceful, perfectly ordinary Toltus village. It's safe, it's familiar. But suddenly, out of nowhere, he is burdened with devastating loss and a terrifying destiny. And this is all symbolized by a simple pendant he inherits. This brilliantly mirrors the experience of the young player sitting in front of the screen. Just as Cress learns that this small, seemingly insignificant object carries the immense, crushing weight of inherited responsibility, the player begins to confront unexpected, heavy burdens of their own within the narrative. Destiny in this game is rarely something you choose. It's something you have to recognize and step up to. Section 2. Systems and Strategic Mastery. Rewiring the Mind. You have to remember the context here. Tales of Phantasia was released in an era heavily dominated by slow, methodical, menu-driven battles. Where you select, attack, and then wait your turn. But this game demanded something entirely different. Its mechanics were not just physical, they were deeply, deeply cognitive. It pioneered what they called the linear motion battle system. Enemies actually moved. Magic flew across the screen in real time. It was chaotic. Mastering Cress's sword techniques meant memorizing complex inputs under immense, real-time pressure. But here's the kicker. Brute force simply wasn't enough. You had to actively manage the battlefield's physical space. You were constantly ensuring you stayed just out of enemy reach while simultaneously creating a safe zone for your ally, Mint, to heal the party. This was genuine, high-level strategic thinking, completely expertly disguised as thrilling, fast-paced action.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how directly these dense, layered mechanics map straight to crucial psychological skills. Look at the linear motion battle system, that forced split-second under-pressure decision-making. Then you had strict inventory limits and finite in-game currency, called GALD. That forced ruthless prioritization and delayed gratification. You couldn't just buy everything, you had to plan. And managing a diverse party, you've got Mint's healing, Klaus's summons, Arch's magic. That demanded a truly holistic strategy. It fundamentally taught players to recognize their own limitations and realize that true victory requires balancing completely different strengths. Cracking his intricate systems at a young age proved to players on a subconscious level that they could navigate complex, overwhelming real-world environments.
Section 3. The Weight of Time. Actions and Echoes. Let's move to and see how this builds across the narrative, because the game doesn't just keep you in one single era. It sends you hurtling across centuries. And this time travel mechanic isn't just some cool sci-fi gimmick. It is a narrative earthquake that entirely shifts the player's focus toward long-term consequence. Notice how this builds across the timeline here. You experience the past, which is this breathing world where your immediate actions actively shape the landscape. Then you return to the present, and you're constantly reconciling cause and effect based on what you just did. And then without warning, you were thrust into the future, a completely ravaged, unresolved timeline that delivers an absolute emotional gut punch.
Jumping between these eras forces a developing mind to really grapple with the concept of generational stewardship. You realize that actions echo. You have to start thinking in terms of long-term survival for a whole world, rather than just securing an immediate short-term victory for yourself.
Consider this for a second. In what ways does navigating a multi-era narrative demand theoretically grounded long-term thinking? It's a huge cognitive leap. When a child's playing a game realizes that failing to plant a literal seed in the past means returning to a barren wasteland in the future, it cultivates a profound understanding of causality. It teaches in a very visceral way that our current choices shape the legacy we leave for our communities. It forces the player to stop being just a tourist in the game world and instead become a custodian of the future. Section 4. Empathy and Moral Complexity. Shattering the Binary.
We all know how it usually goes, right? In many classic tales, the hero slays the monster, everyone cheers, and it's this simple, very comforting fantasy of good conquering evil. But Tales of Phantasia completely shatters this binary. It offers a literal masterclass in developing cognitive empathy. The journey begins with vengeance, plain and simple. Cress's family is slaughtered, his village is destroyed. So his initial motive is pure burning revenge. But as the story unfolds, the narrative shifts drastically. Cress, and by extension the player, must mature. That hot vengeance is replaced by a heavy, mature realization of responsibility. True leadership, the game argues, requires channeling that hurt into constructive protection. It's about navigating competing rights and dealing with bittersweet outcomes, rather than just blindly destroying whatever hurt you in the first place.
So the crucial point is the antagonist himself, Daus. Late in the game, you eventually discover that Daus isn't actually trying to destroy the world out of pure, cartoonish malice. He is desperately trying to harvest mana to save his own dying home planet, Daris Karlin, from total extinction. Let that sink in. Stopping Daus means saving your world, absolutely, but it effectively dooms another. This revelation completely destroys a child's black and white worldview. It forces them to confront the heartbreaking, messy nuance that major life conflicts rarely have easy, victimless resolutions. Sometimes, everyone thinks they are the hero of their own story. Section 5. Navigating the Unguided Journey. The Power of Isolation. To really appreciate this, we have to look at the meta experience of playing this game back in 1995. There were no internet guides in your pocket, there were no glowing quest markers telling you exactly where to go, there weren't even automatic saves to bail you out if you messed up. It was just you, a massively opaque world, and your own intuition. Playing this game blind was literally like walking into a mythic labyrinth. Whether it was hunting down obscure, hidden progression triggers like, having to talk to a very specific NPC twice in a massive, sprawling town just to get a key item, or surviving the treacherous multi-floor gauntlet of the Morelia mineshaft completely unguided, the game was a modern initiation. It constantly, relentlessly tested a player's resolve. It punished the careless, but deeply rewarded the thoroughly curious. And when you are forced to figure things out alone like that, incredible skills are forged in the dark. Just look at this list. You learn real self-reliance because there is simply no external authority coming to save you. You develop serious fear tolerance by pushing through terrifying, high-stakes dungeons where one wrong move means losing hours of progress. You learn to actually trust your own intuition and develop sharp pattern recognition. You cultivate immense, quiet patience through repetitive leveling, realizing that real progress compounds slowly over time. And you learn thoroughness, checking absolutely every corner, every bookshelf, every chest. When a child solves these kinds of interconnected problems entirely on their own, they are stepping into early adulthood training, perfectly disguised as a fantasy adventure. Section 6. A Hero's Lasting Legacy. The Architecture of the Mind. Let's bring this all together to our conceptual climax. What actually happens when the credits finally roll? Looking back from the final, grueling battle at Daus's castle, the distance traveled is just staggering. And this brilliantly illustrates the core truth. The child who picked up the controller at the beginning of the game is genuinely, fundamentally, not the one who sets it down at the end. The true victory wasn't just beating a difficult boss. It was becoming someone capable of enduring extreme frustration. It was becoming someone who fundamentally believes that the other side of hard is worth reaching. The mythic lesson at the very heart of this unguided crucible really boils down to this. No one is coming to save you, but you can save yourself and others. It takes incredible, quiet courage to become a steward of your own destiny, to internalize the cold logic of responsibility, and to willingly carry the weight of protecting your community when things get incredibly difficult. That is what this experience instilled. Every single player out there has an experience that built them.
there's always a piece of media that acted as their own personal crucible. So, I want you to think about your own developmental touchstones for a moment. What foundational media constructed your internal architecture? What lessons did you learn in the dark, staring at a glowing screen? And what legacy did that leave behind in your life today? I strongly encourage you to seek out your own foundation, recognize what it gave you, and honor the journey that shaped who you are. Thank you so much for exploring this with us.